Okay, when the music goes down, it means it's time for me to start talking, so good morning. Did anyone go up on deck this morning to try and see the planets? As I was walking along the corridor, I heard the foghorn go, which is never a good sign. So it was completely foggy. The fog was way down onto the deck of the ship. But yesterday morning, we had a fantastic morning. And those of you who were there, you could see me dancing with joy because I got to see Mercury for the first time in my life. So I was happy. So yesterday was almost a perfect day, and I'll tell you why it wasn't a completely perfect day in a minute. So, summary of today's talk. I'm going to talk about the Southern Cross, which is one of the things a lot of people want to see on a cruise in the Southern Hemisphere. I'll talk about the Magellanic Clouds and where to find them. And I'll talk a little bit about their history, when they were first observed and so on. What are they? Now, they're obviously not clouds in the sense of clouds in our atmosphere, so I'll explain a little bit about what they are. And then I'm going to talk about a lady who I will say more about in my 6th lecture, the last lecture on Sunday, a lady by the name of Henrietta Leavitt, or Leavitt. I'm not quite sure how she pronounced her last name. And she made an important discovery about some stars in one of the Magellanic Clouds. Supernova 1987A, which you can kind of tell from the name was a supernova, a star that exploded in 1987. And then I'll summarize. So what am I up against today? So, if you want a sushi demonstration, you're in the wrong place. As my wife will tell you, the only thing I can do with a plate of food is eat it. I can't prepare food, I can just eat it and consume it. So if you want to see sushi being prepared, you're in the wrong place. But before we talk about any astronomy, there's more important things to talk about. So last night there was something called, is it the Super Bowl? I understand Denver won, yeah, the Broncos won, so. Okay, well, those of you who support the Broncos, well done. Now, far more importantly, it was the opening weekend of the 2016 Six Nations rugby competition. France beat Italy in a very close game, 23-21. In, I don't know how it works outside of Europe, but in Europe, the home team is first. So France were playing at home. It's not like in the US where you say that France were at Italy, as it were. So France were at home. Then the English managed to get a win up in Scotland. So that spoiled my weekend. And then finally, Wales got a draw in Ireland. So that's why it wasn't a perfect day for me. But we did well. We were 13-0 down after 25 minutes, and we came back. We were 16-13 ahead, and then Ireland equalized, so it was an equal match. So the next Six Nations is, of course, next weekend. Well, I shouldn't say, of course, it is next weekend. Wales are playing Scotland in Wales. Are England playing in Italy or at home? In Italy, okay, so that should be the other way around. It should be Italy v England, and France versus Ireland. This is a bit of a paraphrase of a quote, but sport is, of course, important to many people, be it American football or rugby in my case. Now, a very famous English football manager by the name of Bill Shankly, he coached Liverpool through many, many successes. He had this quote. Some people say that football is a matter of life and death. I disagree. It's much more important than that. You can apply that to whichever sport. I'm not going to explain this in detail, but a number of people after the last talk asked me about the geometry. It is explained in my book. This is chapter 4, page 102. If you want me to explain it a bit more, I can do outside, but let me just say the universe is three-dimensional in space, and you cannot imagine a three-dimensional curved surface. It's impossible. It's not because you're stupid, it's because it's impossible. You have to just do an analogy. Okay, so these are analogies. A curved two-dimensional surface with different geometries. I can explain that more outside if you're still interested, but it is explained in my book. Okay, this week's challenge. I always set my students challenge, so you're my students for the next fortnight. There is a prize. Okay, why do we have 7 days in a week? We have 30 odd days in a month because that's the time between a full moon and the next full moon. We have 12 months, sorry, we have 365 days in a year because that's the time we take to go around the sun. 7 days in a week is completely arbitrary. It could be 8, it could be 6. Why do we have 7? Well, there is an astronomical reason. It is because there are 5 naked eye planets plus the sun and the moon. Now in English the connection is not so obvious, but in many languages it is obvious. So the days of the week are named after the 5 naked eye planets. It's not the other way around. The days of the week are named after the planets, plus the sun and the moon. In Spanish, for example, it's fairly obvious for most of them. Domingo, lunes, obviously moon, martes, miércoles, jueves, viernes, and sábado. In French, which I speak fluently, my kids are half French, dimanche, lundi, mardi, mercredi, jeudi, vendredi, samedi. The challenge is, what are the names of the week in Welsh? So if you can supply them to me, that's, you know, you'll get some kind of prize. If you can pronounce them, and pronounce them to my satisfaction, you will have untold wealth. I will cede you all my possessions. I had a student in the University of Toledo where I spent my first year in the US teaching, and she tracked down a Welsh speaker in Toledo, Ohio, and got him to teach her the names of the week in Welsh. She didn't quite have one of them, which is very difficult. There's a sound at the beginning of one of the days of the week in Welsh, which only exists in one other language in the world. And it's not even a Celtic language, it's an African language. She couldn't get that sound because it's so unusual. But I still moved her grade up from, I think it was B+ to an A or something. She made such an effort. So that's your challenge for the week. I give you until Friday, which will be not my next lecture, but the one after that. What are the days of the week in Welsh? And have a go at pronouncing them. The Southern Cross. Okay, so a lot of people want to see the Southern Cross, and those of you who are out looking at the planets, yesterday morning, I'm losing track now, it was way up overhead, right overhead as we were looking at the planets in the morning. So this is the Southern Cross. It turns out that the Southern Cross is a constellation in its own right. The International Astronomical Union have designated there are 88 constellations in the sky. Now obviously, a lot of them were named by the ancient Greeks, Orion and Gemini and all that lot. The ones in the southern hemisphere, of course, Europeans didn't know about until a few hundred years ago. But at some point, and I don't know what date it was, sometime I think in the 20th century, the IAU, the International Astronomical Union, said, right, there are going to be 88 constellations in the sky. And the Southern Cross is a constellation. It's the smallest in the sky. It's the smallest constellation in the sky. Why is it so important? Well, first of all, finding it is relatively easy. The 3 of the stars are reasonably bright, but if you're having difficulty, you use these 2 pointer stars. And this star is the 3rd brightest star in the sky. It's down here as Rigel Centaurus. It's more commonly known as Alpha Centauri, which you've probably all heard of Alpha Centauri. So that is the 3rd brightest star in the sky, anywhere in the sky, northern or southern hemisphere, and you use those 2 pointers to find the Southern Cross. The reason the Southern Cross is so important in the southern hemisphere is because it points at the south celestial pole. So in other words, as the Earth rotates on its axis, all the stars appear to go around the south celestial pole, and in the northern hemisphere they appear to go around the north celestial pole in an anti-clockwise, counterclockwise direction. Because we're in the southern hemisphere and everything works backwards here, they go around in a clockwise direction. Okay, so there is no star at the south celestial pole, but the Southern Cross points to it. So, and I think is it about 5 times the length between these 2 stars? 6 times. 5 or 6 times the length between these 2 stars is where you would find where the south celestial pole is. Now, so these are the 4 stars. Actually, there's a 5th. If you're in a dark enough place, well, I say dark enough place, you should be able to see it tonight. This star is reasonably easy to see. These 4 are very, very easy. Alpha Crux, Beta Crux, Gamma Crux, and Delta Crux. And these are their brightnesses in this strange magnitude system that astronomers use. And I'm not going to try and explain it because it's a bit complicated, but just to remind you, smaller numbers mean brighter. So 2.78 is fainter than a smaller number. It's a bizarre system.